Okay, ready? Testing, testing. One. Did it sound okay? Like before the sound cut out? Was it sounding good? Okay. Hello and welcome to a new video in my new series, which is combining my two books, Isaiah, a Biblical Microcosm, and Metacosm, a study of the Bible book order. And I'm doing a series of videos on this as I am working on this project. I am just coming across various discoveries that the Lord is leading me to, and I'm sharing them as they come, as I kind of work on them and detail them. And I'm just trying to get this out as quickly as possible because it is a long project. It's going to take, if the Lord tarries, it's going to take probably another year for me to finish it. So I'm just sharing things as they come and as I discover them, and hopefully they bless people who are following along. So in my study, Isaiah, a Biblical Microcosm, there's plenty of videos on this channel that show the details of that. You can go watch them. But just real quick summary, each chapter of Isaiah has a direct link to each book of the Bible in order. So Isaiah chapter 1 matches Genesis, Isaiah chapter 2 matches Exodus, and so on. There's 66 chapters in Isaiah, 66 books of the Bible. In Metacosm, I demonstrate how the books in the order that they're presented in, with the themes of each book, is a direct correlation to the progression of the life of a believer. So for instance, in Genesis, we have man's perfect creation, or God's perfect creation, ruined by man's sin, and it ends with death in the world, death and bondage and slavery into the world. And then Exodus shows how God sends a savior, Moses in type, a type of Christ, to lead the Israelites out of bondage to the world, death, sin, slavery, and Satan, into the promised land, a new and eternal life that he invites them to share in. And so that starts a progression of Israel's history, which mirrors the actual spiritual progression of a Christian's life. And so if both of those are true, which I believe they are, and the Lord has had me work on these studies for the past really 20 years of my life, and so this is kind of the culmination of that work, of putting the two together, Metacosm with Isaiah, the Biblical Microcosm, and putting the two together. And this is kind of the final piece that testing, testing, testing. Okay, are you getting it now? Hello, hello, testing, testing, testing. Okay, sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. I know on this channel there's been some problems with the background clicking, and we've been trying to take care of that, so I'm trying some different settings, so please bear with us. Sorry for the interruption there. Okay, so anyway, with that said, I'm going to be showing my screen here, so you can see what is happening here and what I'm finding on these notes. And we'll see that we're right now in Isaiah chapter 8, which is mirroring Ruth, which is book 8. So Ruth is a picture of the rapture. Why? Because Ruth is a Gentile bride, and she's marrying a Jewish kinsman redeemer. That's what the story of Ruth is all about. So when you see that, Isaiah chapter 8, if this construct is correct, should be showing something to do with the rapture. It should have a prophetic significance regarding the rapture, and I believe the Lord has revealed what that is here in this study. And so I'm going to be demonstrating that through several scriptures here. And so, first of all, we're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 8, the first 4 verses. And it says, "Moreover, the Lord said unto me, Take thee a great roll, and write in it with a man's pen concerning Maher-shalal-Hashbaz." That's Isaiah's son. "And I took unto me faithful witnesses to record, Uriah the priest, and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah. And I went unto the prophetess," that's Isaiah's wife, "and she conceived, and bare a son. Then said the Lord to me, Call his name Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. For before the child shall have knowledge to cry, My father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away before the king of Assyria." Okay, so a little bit of a quick background here. This is a continuation of Isaiah chapter 7, which is where Isaiah goes with his firstborn son, Shear-Jashub, and he goes and he tells King Ahaz not to worry, that the confederacy between Syria, with the capital of Damascus, and the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, Samaria, they're conspiring and confederating against him to attack him and go to war. And there's a great deal of strife in the land because the Lord allows this attack to happen. However, it's from the Lord, and it's just a chastening. It is not going to be a complete destruction. Judah is going to ultimately be victorious. God is going to lead them through it, but God is going to allow this chastening to happen to them. And so Isaiah is telling that to King Ahaz, who is a wicked king, and telling him not to fret, not to worry, but instead King Ahaz goes and he starts doing all of this crazy stuff. He even builds a false temple, a pagan altar, I should say, not a temple, but a pagan altar, and he starts putting up this pagan altar all over Jerusalem, and doing all these crazy things. And you can read about this in 2 Chronicles chapter 28, and also 2 Kings 16. And so when you see everything that Ahaz is doing, he's terrified because he believes that he's going to be defeated, and he's doing everything he can except turning to the Lord. So even though he doesn't turn to the Lord sends him the prophet Isaiah to go tell him, hey, don't worry about this. This is all my doing. I'm going to lead you through it. And in Isaiah chapter 7, he actually names the whole prophecy about the famous prophecy that applies to Christ is the child Emmanuel. Okay, so if you watched the other video, I'm not going to repeat it here, but Ahaz, the video that's titled Ahaz and Gideon, if you watch that video, I'll detail this whole section here and how this was a dual prophetic fulfillment. Of course, ultimately we know it's fulfilled in Christ. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, God with us. That's Christ, of course, it applies to him. However, there was also an immediate fulfillment of this, and the whole idea here was, before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good. What that means is that basically means before the Israelite child was bar mitzvahed, meaning before they turn 13 years old. And that means, in other words, before they're ready to know enough and to be accountable to God themselves to choose good and refuse evil. In other words, become a son of the mitzvah. That's what bar mitzvah means, to become a son of the mitzvah, the law. Before the child would know to do that, in other words, before 12 years had transpired from the birth of this initial immediate fulfillment of this prophecy, there would be the two kings that were coming against Ahaz, which was Rezin and Remaliah, or Pekah, Remaliah's son. They would be forsaken, and they would be destroyed. So Isaiah had already given this prophecy, and now comes Isaiah chapter 8. So what's happening here? If you look in 2 Chronicles 28, you'll see that after Isaiah gives his prophecy about before this child will be bar mitzvah, basically, before he turns 13, these two kings are going to be wiped out, so you don't need to worry about it. Well, the following year, you see what happens is this is that partial invasion that the Lord allows. And so Pekah, the son of Remaliah, he goes into Judah and he slays 120,000 in one day. And so it's Isaiah's reputation is kind of on the line here, because Isaiah the prophet had said, don't worry about this. This is not going to be successful. Pekah and Reason, their attack on Judah, is ultimately going to fail. That's what Isaiah's prophecy is. It's ultimately going to fail. So you don't have to fret. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to consult all these pagan rituals and this pagan altar that he tried to build, Ahaz. You don't have to do all this nonsense. I am going to be with you, and I am going to allow it to. I'm going to allow this to happen, but before 12 years is out, essentially, they're going to be both utterly and completely destroyed. Reason and Pekah are both going to be completely destroyed. And it just so happens that this prophecy was given in 734 BC, and by 722 BC, exactly as Isaiah prophesied, the whole attack against Judah had been completely overthrown. Israel was taken into captivity by Assyria, and the whole thing was over. And then Hezekiah begins to reign in Judah, and everything, goes back to, being peaceful and tranquil, at least for a time. And Hezekiah, of course, had a great reign. And so, right now, though, with Isaiah chapter 8, here is the critical component. In Isaiah chapter 8, this is like roughly a year after Isaiah had made the other prophecy. And this time he has another child. So he has a child, and he calls him Maher Shalal Hashbaz, which means quick is the spoil and speedy is the prey. And then regarding this child, he says, before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother. In other words, that's before usually a child has reached the age of 2 years old. So before the child is even 2 years old, or 1.5 years old, like between the first and second year of the child, before the child's even talking, like crying out, Mama, Dada, like before the child is even that developed, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away. Now keep in mind that this is in light of the fact that Reason and Remaliah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, had just come into Judah and killed 120,000 soldiers in one day. And so this is basically Isaiah is doubling down this prophecy. He's doubling down and saying, he's basically saying this is how serious Isaiah is taking this prophecy. He's basically saying, I am so sure of this, I am going to name my son. The Lord has told me to name my son the name of this prophecy. My son's name is at stake here. Because if this prophecy fails, imagine if you had a son and you named your son according to some crazy prophecy that seemed impossible, that seemed so unlikely to happen, and you named your own son the name of the prophecy. It would be like if the prophecy didn't come to pass, your son would be a laughingstock for the rest of his life. That you named your son something like, let's just say like this. You named your son something like, rapture is going to happen next year. That's how crazy it would be. So imagine if somebody named their son rapture next year. Well, imagine that your son would be, if the rapture didn't happen by next year, your son would be mocked and ridiculed for the whole rest of his life, and probably later on he would change his name out of humiliation. And so when this happens, we can see that that's how serious this prophecy is being portrayed, is that Isaiah attaches it to the very name of his son. Now, a couple of other things here. Let's keep in mind that this piece right here, where it says, take thee a great roll. Okay, well, an actual better translation here would be tablet. Take thee a great tablet. And what it meant was a big a sign. It meant like a placard, and it would be like a piece of metal or stone. And well, this happened. It would be like the tablet, giant, a great tablet, and what it meant was a big, which would be able to be written with these like a placard, and it would be like a piece of metal, it's a giant or stone. That could be put on a placard, like you might see like a homeless person, have a big sign. This happened, it would be like this. It says, "Please help, need food," or giant for food, or something like that. So it's a big tablet would be, and it would be written on with, and really the prophecy is just those 4 words. Okay. So it's a giant sign, huge long that could be put on a placard, like you might see like a homeless person, have a big sign that has a few words on it. Speedy is please help, need food. In other words, this is going to happen suddenly. Like that. So it's a big tablet, fast, and it would be written on, and really the prophecy is just those 4 words. And so the whole idea here, prophecy, the prophecy, and that's what I'm simply going to show, quick and demonstrate in speedy is the this study is going to happen suddenly. Is that as we see this, let's look at a couple of things. First, let's go back to Isaiah chapter 8. So notice this. I want to apply this to the rapture, right? Because it's chapter 8 and it's book 8. And how does this apply to the rapture? Well, first of all, notice that Mahershala Hashbaz is quick as the spoil, speedy as the prey. Okay, so what do we have regarding the rapture that would indicate a spoil? Well, let's look at another scripture here, and let's put this up and search on it. And so let's put notice in Matthew 24, which is directly speaking about the rapture, Jesus himself says, "But know this, that if the good men of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up." Also, you'll see in, it's also in Matthew chapter 12. If you go to Matthew chapter 12, you'll see that in that passage, it talks about, let's just do it real quick. Okay, so let's go to and we'll see he actually uses the word plunder. Find it here real quick. Okay, yeah, here it is. Or else how can one enter a strong man's house and spoil or plunder his goods, except he first bind the strong man, and then he will spoil his house. So very interesting passage there, that the rapture is talked about as a spoil, as a plunder. And what do we also know about the rapture from 1 Corinthians 15? Let's see it here. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So you can see that it's going to happen quickly. The plunder will happen in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Now, of course, in the original context of this passage, it would be very hard to derive this information. Why? Because it's talking about a prophetic, immediate prophetic destiny. It's talking about the immediate prophecy of what's going to happen here with Ahaz and Pekah and Reason and all that stuff that's actually happening right there in the heat of the moment. That's what's the immediate context is that. Okay, so think about this for a moment. Notice that if that was all this was, Isaiah would not have put this in an eternal prophetic book that's supposed to be for all time as just a simple prophetic history lesson. This prophecy also has a future prophetic fulfillment and a future destiny that's related to us. And so he actually names his own son, right? It's like, think about it in our context. He names his son in the twinkling of an eye. Rapture will happen, next year or something like that. Like, it's a crazy name to give your child. That's what this is. It's a crazy name to give your son. And so when he gives this prophecy, he's doubling down so hard on this that it is making it, impossible for him to get out of it. That his whole prophetic career is riding on this prophecy coming true or not. And that's how serious it is. And then let's read this prophetically now, right? Let's read it prophetically. For before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother. Notice this. The riches of Damascus. Okay, well, what did that mean at the time? At the time, it meant, of course, the spoil that Damascus, Syria, had taken from Judah, and they'd killed the 120,000 soldiers, and they'd taken back spoil and riches to Damascus. Of course, in the original context, that's what it means. Think about it in the prophetic context. Who was the apostle to the Gentiles? Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, has his conversion experience on the road to Damascus. Therefore, I'm suggesting that the phrase in Isaiah 8:4, which says the riches of Damascus, has a far-reaching application after the near-reaching application during the actual time of Isaiah's ministry. So the near-reaching application is actually the physical spoil. The far-reaching spiritual application is after Paul's conversion experience on the road to Damascus, he becomes the apostle to the Gentiles, and he basically, with God's empowerment, he essentially one man transforms the entire known world at the time to become converted to Christianity, to start gathering a bride for his church. And so also notice the adjoining phrase, the spoil of Samaria. Okay, so Samaria was teamed up with Syria, and of course Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. And in a far-reaching application, as per Jesus speaking to the Samaritan woman at the well, and she was a Gentile, as per 2 Kings 17:23-41. So I'm not going to go read that right now, but the Samaritan woman was a Gentile. So you have the apostle to the Gentiles who starts in Damascus, and you have the woman at the well, a Gentile. So it's speaking this spoil, this prey, this treasure that is going to be taken or robbed. The world is going to be robbed of the treasure of this world. And we really are the pearl of great price. And the plunderer is Jesus himself, and he is going to plunder this world for the riches of Damascus, and the spoil of Samaria. So everything that he planted here, that he started by his Spirit to pay the purchase price for his bride, that is what's being talked about here, and in prophetic context. And so we'll notice that there's a lot of name meanings here that are very interesting. Boaz is Ruth's kinsman redeemer, settles the matter of Elimelech's son's inheritance and the redemption of Ruth quickly, within the same day. It happens very fast, and she becomes his wife. The matter is settled on the following day from their engagement. So this happens quickly. And of course we know here, once again, quick is the spoil, speedy is the prey. Now, here's some other interesting points on this. Judah, during the time of Naomi and Elimelech, and leading up to Boaz and Ruth, there was a severe famine, and they were going through a time of terrible ordeal during their lifespan. Just like in Isaiah's time, they're going through terrible tribulation and a lot of difficulty, but God is not allowing it to completely destroy them, but He's only allowing it as a chastening. And when Naomi comes back into the land and starts being reestablished there and laying down roots, is the exact same time when Ruth, her daughter-in-law, is married to Boaz, Naomi's kinsman redeemer. And so what happens here is another picture of all the strife that's going on. Well, when Israel comes back into the land, there's going to be a lot of strife going on right when the rapture happens. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out right now. Okay, then you have Pika, which means eye-opener. Ramalia, which means adorned by the Lord. So if you read it that way, eye-opener, the son of him who's adorned by the Lord, and firm, that's what reason means. So Judah suffered under King Ahaz during his reign. They were attacked by the northern kingdom of Israel and Syria. God once again allowed a suffering and a chastening to occur to Judah during this time, but not a total devastation. Okay, and it's interesting to note that 120,000 were killed. Also note that we just got past the 120th year of the 20th century, where the world went through a great devastation. Okay, also notice here, Naomi figuratively represents a disobedient Israel, as she left Israel when times were difficult in the famine. She returns after losing everything, and when she hears that God has started blessing Israel once more. So what's happening right now in Israel? God is starting to bless Israel once more, a nation of less than 1 million people. It's actually about, interestingly, if you go look at the actual population of Israel right now, it's getting very close to 888,888 people, as the world approaches 8 billion people. Okay, this speaks to Isaiah's first son, Shear-Jashub. His first son's name means a remnant shall return. As she is back in the land with Ruth, marries the Jewish kinsman redeemer Boaz, much like Israel is now mostly back in the land, and the Gentile church is awaiting the rapture, where our kinsman redeemer will marry us, spiritually speaking, quickly, at which point the remainder of the prophetic destiny of Israel shall be fulfilled. Okay, so this is interesting. Notice that what happens is the Assyrian comes and wipes out Syria and northern Israel, and the Assyrian is one of the many titles of the forthcoming Antichrist, and you can see that it's in many passages in the Old Testament. One place you'll find it is Micah 5, verses 5 and 6. We can go look at that right now real quick. So let's look at Micah 5, 5 and 6. This is, of course, after the famous passage about where the Messiah would be born, in Bethlehem Ephrathah. Though thou be little amongst the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto this that is ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting, indicating that God himself would be manifest in flesh and be the Messiah, and he would show up on the scene from Bethlehem, which means house of bread, by the way. Therefore he will give them up until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth, the remnant of his brethren shall return. So remember, remnant, the remnant, Shear-Jashub, Isaiah's first son, means a remnant shall return. So this is Shear-Jashub right here, unto the children of Israel. And then he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide, for now he shall be great unto the ends of the earth. Notice this, and this man shall be the peace, where the Assyrian, this is the title of the Antichrist, shall come into our land. So notice, Micah skips over the church age. Micah just goes right from the Messiah to the end times. There is no church age here. It skips directly from this to this. And so that's why a lot of, prophetic understanding is so important to understand Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27 correctly, that there is a pause, there is a parenthesis of this prophetic fulfillment called the church age, which we're in. Okay, and so in Micah's vision here, in his prophecy, there is no pause. It just goes straight from this to this. So straight from Messiah coming and being cut off, immediately to And this man shall be the peace, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces. Then shall we raise up against him 7 shepherds and 8 principled men. This is very interesting because 7 is like the number of the church, 8 is like the number of Christ. So when you have 7 and 8 together, it's 15. 15 is a very interesting number, scripturally speaking. It's like the church and Christ together. That's kind of what it prophetically implies. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod. Notice Nimrod is mentioned as the founder of Assyria, the founder of Nineveh. He's also the first type or prefigure of a global antichrist. And so notice he's associated here with the Assyrian Nimrod. In other words, this was the beginning of this antichrist prophetic prefigure, and the Assyrian is the ultimate fulfillment of it, as portrayed in the book of Revelation. The Assyrian is a title in the Old Testament of the Antichrist. When he comes into our land and when he treadeth within our borders, that's going to be when he goes into the temple, proclaims himself to be God, demands to be worshipped as God, implements the mark of the beast, all that stuff. That's what it's talking about here in Micah 5:5 and 5:6. The title of him in this case is the Assyrian. So who is Isaiah talking about here in chapter 8? Notice what happens after these 4 verses, which I'm submitting are a picture of the rapture, that we're going to be taken away before the king of Assyria, before the Antichrist, the Assyrian. Then what happens is Isaiah prophesies what's going to happen next, after the rapture, in other words. The Lord spake unto me again, saying, For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that's the gentle, soft waters of the stream that fed the temple, basically a picture of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. You refuse that, and what are they like? They want to go after reason and Ramalia. In other words, they're after political intrigue, they're after assassinations, they're after political upheaval, they're after all these things that they want, and they just refuse to accept the peace and the love of Jesus Christ. And so this is what the warning is after the rapture. Now therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth up upon them the waters of the river. That's the Euphrates. That's where the Assyrian is going to come from. That was the original land of Assyria, was on the border of the Euphrates. Strong and many, even the king of Assyria, again the Assyrian, in all his glory. And he shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks. Notice this. And he shall pass through the Judah. So he's going in this case, he's actually going to get up to Judah, all the way to Judah. And of course, the near-reaching prophetic of this is Hezekiah's time. The Assyrian king comes and he's going to wipe out Judah, but God does not let it happen. But it gets very, very close. And so notice this: he shall overflow and go over; he shall reach even to the neck, even to the neck. And so, in the near-reaching application of this prophetic fulfillment, we see that Judah is almost overrun by the Assyrian king, and God saves them through Hezekiah and by an angel, a destroying angel that comes and wipes out 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in one night. And so they're all destroyed. But notice the far-reaching implication of this when it's actually talking about the real final fulfillment of the actual Antichrist himself. It's going to be to the neck. Is that prophetically significant? Think about it. What's going to happen to those who refuse the mark of the beast? They're going to have their head chopped off, up to right at the neck. And the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel. In other words, this is a fulfillment of Antichrist coming in and overrunning Israel and Judah and Jerusalem. But even though all of that is true, God is still with us. God is still with his people that are going to be enduring and living and dying and being martyred through that time. And notice what else is part of this, interestingly. It says, associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Does that seem to have a Revelation prophetic fulfillment? Associate yourselves? That's actually a technical term, associate. Um, when you have, for instance, a network connection made, you are having you're associating yourself with that network. And so associate yourselves, O you people, and you shall be broken in pieces. In other words, take the mark of the beast, this coming um, association, where you are going to be directly connected technologically and spiritually um, to Satan himself. That's essentially what it means. And the warning here is, associate yourselves and give ear all ye of far country. So it's not just Israel, it's the whole world. Gird yourselves and you shall be broken in pieces. In other words, try to protect yourself, you're going to be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, you're going to be broken in pieces. Take counsel together, and it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're in that time, you're going to, this is going to be wiped out. And so it says, Isaiah says, "For the Lord spake thus to me with a strong hand, and instructed me that I should not walk in the way of this people." So it's an indication that this is a prefigure of how the end times is going to play out, when God tells his people, have nothing to do with this, even if it costs you your life. Don't worry about the consequences. The most important thing is to not associate yourselves with what's going on. So this is a couple more things here to point out. I found this interesting. Check this out. The Assyrian, in the Old Testament, his title is actually spelled a couple of different ways in the Old Testament. In 1 Kings 16, it's spelled like this, Tiglath-Pileser. However, in 1 Chronicles 28, it's spelled like this, Tilgath-Pilneser. And what this is, there's a study on this, and you can get this from Abarim Publications, which does studies of the entire, all the names in the Bible, and what their Hebrew root meanings are, and what they mean. But this is interesting because Tilgath, or Tiglath-Pileser, or Tilgath-Pilneser, is a Hebrew transliteration of an Assyrian phrase. It's a different language. And the Assyrian phrase is Tukulti Apil Esada. And depending on which way it's transliterated, it actually carries some different meanings to it. One is, my trust is in the son of Asher. That's the Assyrian, aka Antichrist. Also, it can also mean, check this out, those who went into exile now realize that they will be in eternal bondage. You take the mark of the beast, it's over for all eternity. You're going to be in eternal bondage if you make this association between yourself and essentially Satan himself. Therefore, this name of the king of Assyria becomes very significant indeed regarding its prefiguring within the prophetic context of Isaiah chapter 8. The first type of Antichrist, of course, is Nimrod. We already said that. He actually builds Assyria and the capital city of Assyria, Nineveh. Therefore, the prophetic overtones of the king of Assyria all through Scripture hint at Antichrist types. And, of course, this example is no different. Okay. This is interesting that in Ruth, Boaz assembles 10 witnesses that attest to the marriage contract between Boaz and Elimelech's estate, which includes Ruth, whom he marries. So he assembles 10 witnesses. Here, in Isaiah chapter 8, Uriah, which means God is light, and Zechariah means God remembers, who's the son of Jeberechiah, which means God blesses. So check this out. God is light. God remembers the Son. God blesses. And so if you look at all those prophetic connections there to what this is ultimately speaking about, all the names are prophetically significant. Also, Isaiah takes Uriah and Zechariah, the son of Jeberechiah. They are his two witnesses to this prophecy of quick is the spoil, speedy is the prey. And he even names his own son after the name of the prophecy. Okay, so Boaz and Ruth's marriage produces Obed, whose name means servant of God, and he in turn fathers Jesse, who's David's father, and his name means my husband, God exists, who in turn fathers David, whose name means beloved, and of course he becomes the king himself. So Isaiah's prophecy is directly attached to the name of his son, Maher-shalal-Hashbaz, and of course all these names, and as this genealogy goes down from Ruth and Boaz down to King David over the next generations, before the kingdom would come to David, there was a time of false hope, false peace, and a disobedient king, which is of course King Saul, which would have to transpire first as seen in the next book, 1 Samuel, which is about a king who seemed good at first, but ends up being a disaster for Israel and actually an enemy to God's true king, David. And so this is a picture of Saul. So keep in mind that Saul is a picture of the Antichrist. Israel loves him at first, thinks he's great, head and shoulders above the rest. He seems like he's going to be this wonderful champion for goodness and peace and all these wonderful things. He's so handsome and everything's so nice and wonderful, but because of his disobedience, it ends up being a disaster, and he actually becomes an enemy to God's true king, David, and David's followers, God's people. And so Saul actually ends up trying to kill David and his men and his followers. So this person who's going to come in like a man of peace, the Antichrist, is going to seem to be friendly to Israel, is going to allow them to rebuild their temple, is going to do all these things that seem so great, but then ultimately it's going to be nothing but falsehood and nothing but disaster and ruin. Okay, so after the allusion in Isaiah 8, 1-4 regarding the rapture of the church, Isaiah has a future warnings about Israel's danger of allegiance to wickedness and tells Isaiah to stay apart from the people, and it is full of allusions to the king of Assyria, who in the prophetic speaks to the Assyrian, a title of Antichrist himself, like we just mentioned. So all this is in this study, and these are, right now, it's just kind of the rough draft notes that I have. But I'm forming and shaping it and working on it. I'm just trying to share what the Lord's showing me as it comes, section by section. I'm really excited about the next one. I've already have that one almost finished as well, Isaiah chapter 9, corresponding to 1 Samuel, and that one is awesome. And it's real interesting to note that the books of Judges, book 7, Ruth 8, and 1 Samuel, book 9, they all overlap in terms of their era as well as their prophetic implications. Just the same way Isaiah chapters 7 through 9 do likewise. So Ruth occurs towards the end of the time of the Judges, while 1 Samuel's first 8 chapters detail the very end of the era of the Judges. So you can see how they bleed into each other. Isaiah chapter 7, 8, and 9 bleed into each other and all their prophetic implications, just like the books of Judges, Ruth, and 1 Samuel all bleed into and overlap with each other in terms of timeline and prophetic destiny and prophetic implications. And so all of this is basically just a written version of everything that I just shared orally. And so I think I'll probably just stop there and just hope that everybody has enjoyed this study that watches it, and share it out. And I'm going to be doing the Isaiah chapter 9 version of this, and going along with 1 Samuel. Hopefully sometime this week, if I get it finished in time to present it live here on a video. And I will also be back, of course, tomorrow night for our Monday night Bible study. And so hopefully everybody can, again, be there and join us for that as well. So praise God, God bless you all, and we'll see you tomorrow night and or in the next video.